Hey guys, welcome back to HOA Karen Stories. I thought the HOA was annoying until a guy dressed in a fake HOA police uniform pulled a gun on me in my own driveway over a trash bin. But what he didn't know, I am an actual cop and I was not about to let this slide. What happened next turned the entire neighborhood upside down. And the title story starts like this. I, 35 male, live in a community that, when I first moved in, had an HOA that had a pretty firm grip on the neighborhood. Now, when I moved in, I was fully aware of what I could be getting myself into. I would hear horror stories about HOAs going crazy with rules and fines. I had checked on the neighborhood's website and asked around the area to make sure that I was not getting into anything weird here. The neighbors praised the HOA and the website gave me their updated handbook about regulations they had in place. It seemed pretty straightforward, and when I signed for my home, I was excited to be a part of the new neighborhood. A bit of background on me, since it comes into play later on in the story. I've been a cop for 10 years, my station is located less than a mile from my house, and I am an officer of the township where my neighborhood is. While I do have days where I have regular work schedule, there can be times when I'm asked to assist with desk work or help cover for other officers that are sick or off on another assignment. This has me coming home in the late evening or sometimes early mornings, depending on what it is I am asked to help out with. Back to when I first moved in, sorry if I jump around a little bit, I just wanted to make sure you guys have all the context. The first month was great. I got used to the routine of the neighborhood, learned where I should put my trash, attended my first HOA open forum, which is basically a meeting where the board opens the floor to residents if they have concerns about a certain rule or if they notice something that the board did not know about. It was after the forum that I realized that I might have had some rose-tinted glasses on in regards to the HOA board. Most of the things that people brought up during the meeting were the fines. Apparently, they had gotten a bit more intense over the past year and a half, and the community was looking for answers as to what could be done to either reduce the fines or find some sort of compromise for what they were being fined for. And some of the fines sounded bogus to begin with. One couple had gotten a new car and were fined because it was not the correct make and model that the HOA approved of. Another woman was fined because she had bought plants for the inside of her home, but she had left them on her porch when she was unloading her car, and the HOA fined her for having plants on her porch that were not approved. Just a lot of weird things. And by the way guys, if you live in an HOA and ever got any weird fines, please let us know in the comments because I would love to hear about that. Anyway, the HOA board claimed that each fine was legitimate and not paying the fines could cause them to be doubled or tripled depending on how long it took for someone to pay them. I openly asked how the HOA was finding out about these violations so quickly, since it didn't seem like the neighbors were snitching on each other, since everyone seemed to be getting different fines at different times during the day. One of the board members told me that the HOA police were the ones who provided those fines. Now, the HOA police was not something mentioned in the handbook or on the HOA website. The people I spoke to when I was looking at the neighborhood did not mention them either, so I thought it seemed to be a newer thing that only a few people had ever gotten to see in action. I did speak to a few people after the forum, and only one gave me some information on what to look out for. The HOA police force was a group of 6 people, maybe close to their 40s or 50s, that drove around in golf carts and dressed up in uniforms that proclaimed them to be the HOA police. These people would give out tickets, which were just ramped up fines for things they saw wrong with a person's house or if they were doing something illegal. I wanted to laugh at the whole thing, but the next forum had more requests on lenient fines, as well as discussing if the HOA could just send out people to police the area to catch someone in the act of doing something in violation of the rules. Even some of the violations were not actual violations, according to some of my neighbors. One woman had been out gardening to clear out some weeds, and one of the officers gave her a ticket because it looked like she was pulling up the bushes that the HOA had planted there when the house was first acquired. She showed the board pictures of the bushes, all of them intact and not pulled up, and asked for the fine to be removed. The board denied her request. I did not speak up much in past forums, but I knew that it was going to be a matter of time before the officers found their way into my part of the neighborhood when I was home and ready to confront them. I told the board that these fines were getting out of hand. I also mentioned that they should not be referring to their group as police since, well, these people had not even been trained and were just HOA members on a power trip. I told them that I was not going to pay their fees if fined, and if they had an issue with it, then I would get a lawyer involved. A few of the other neighbors seconded my speech and said that they would not pay any of the tickets they were given. The HOA board did not respond at the meeting, but did send out a neighborhood email that stated that the HOA police would be patrolling more frequently, and anyone who was ticketed that already had an unpaid fine would have their fines doubled. I made sure to save that email in a folder that I was going to send to a lawyer. I did see the officers on patrol, and they did drive around in a golf cart that had an orange flashing light on top of it. Their uniforms did look like police officer uniforms, but they had patches on the front of their shirts and on their right sleeves that said HOA Police. I would usually catch them when I was heading to work or coming back late in the afternoon, but they did not stay too long. I figured that they were waiting to see if I would unpack my car with items that did not fit the HOA standards, but it was just me getting into my car to head to work or getting out of my car after a day on the job. It was only a matter of time before the officers found me when I was doing something they could fine me for. I was coming home from an overnight shift, so it was close to 5 AM by the time I returned home. It was still pretty dark when I pulled into my garage. I realized that it was trash day, and I'd forgotten to move my bins out of my garage to the curb. The truck usually comes around 8 AM. As I was moving my bins, I saw a flashing light at the end of my driveway. Two of the HOA officers were leaning up against their golf cart, one already taking out a flashlight and notepad to start writing down a ticket. The one without a notepad came up to me with a flashlight, shining it in my eyes. Another thing I forgot to mention, I did not really have anything to indicate that I was a police officer unless someone asked to see my badge. My car does not have anything on it to indicate that I'm an officer, and I wear plain clothes for the overnight shift. I figured that would also give some context as well. Officer number 1: "Bit late to be putting out your bins, huh?" Me: "Yeah, I just got back from work, I didn't have a chance yesterday." I left the house before the designated time to put them out, so I figured I would do it now before the truck came. Officer number 1: "Sir, you do realize you're in violation of the trash ordinance set up by the HOA?" Me: pulling one of my bins out onto the driveway. Well, if there was an update to the handbook about the trash, I haven't seen it yet. But I feel like that doesn't matter, does it? Officer number 1: "Put the bin back, you're getting a ticket." Me: "Why?" The only thing in the HOA handbook about putting garbage bins out is to make sure they are not out before 7 PM the night before collection and are back off the curb by 10 AM. If there was an update to the handbook, then that should have been mentioned at the last meeting or sent out in an email so that everyone would know. "There wasn't an email. You cannot just put your bins out in the morning like this. It is not right." Me, continuing to move one of the bins towards where the officers are at the end of my driveway. I think I made it clear in the last forum that I'm not gonna pay this ticket you give me for something like this. There's nothing you have to back up on if there wasn't an email, and it's not in the handbook, so just leave your ticket with me and go away, and I promise I won't rip it up while you're here. Officer number 1 suddenly holding out his hand. "Sir, step away from me and put the bin back." Me: "Stops. I'm literally just moving them down my driveway. I'm not even that close to you." The officer grabbed the right side of his belt and pulled a gun on me. I thought I lost my mind for a second. The person I talked to about the HOA police didn't say anything about them carrying firearms. Do you have a permit for that? Officer number 1: "I'm a member of the HOA police force and I have every right to carry a gun." Just because you're a part of the neighborhood watch doesn't mean you have a permit to carry a weapon. You know nothing, Jon Snow. You're not law enforcement. Civilians need a permit for a right to carry. Officer 1: "I'm an officer. Now I'm going to have you move back away from me." Holds the gun up so it's aiming for my shoulder. I look past him to see if his partner has anything to say about this. The other officer saw me looking and gave me a dirty look. He said, "You should listen to him. You wouldn't want him to hurt you, would you?" Me straightening up and putting my hands up. "Okay, I'm not moving the bin. Put that down please before someone gets hurt." Officer number 1 takes a step closer onto my driveway. "I'm just defending myself against a rule breaker. Now you're going to move that bin back into your garage and I might let you live." Me: "Did you just threaten to kill me?" Officer number 2: "I wouldn't be thinking about that and just put your bin back." I then reached into my pocket for my badge, discreetly making sure that my gun was in reach. The first officer's hand was shaking and I still couldn't wrap my head around the fact that someone pulled a gun on me for taking my bins outside of my garage. I looked around at the other houses to see if there was anyone awake that was seeing this, but the houses were dark. It was still too early for anyone to be up and looking outside their window. Officer number 1, "Stop stalling and move," takes another step up the driveway, me now realizing that he made a big mistake. You do realize that this counts as trespassing, right? You were not invited to my property and you're literally threatening me with violence if I don't comply with your demands. That is grounds for arrest. Officer number 1, "I have jurisdiction here. I'm an officer of the law." Officer number 2, "We have the HOA board behind us. Calling the cops is not gonna do anything." Me, "Oh, I'm not going to call them just yet." I held up my hand with my badge in it, "But I'm going to arrest you first for trespassing, handling a firearm without a permit, and threatening a police officer." I never saw the color drain out of someone's face as quickly as it did out of Officer number 1's face. He immediately put up his hands and dropped the gun. It didn't fall heavy on the driveway, but it clattered to the ground and broke. The HOA officer's gun was plastic, but was painted to look like a very convincing fake, especially in the early morning light. Officer number 2 dropped her flashlight and started to tear up. Officer number 1, "Please, please, please, the gun is not real, see? I was just trying to act tough. I was not going to do anything to you." Officer number 2, "Please don't arrest us, please. We are just doing our jobs." Me, "I don't think those jobs should include threatening to kill someone because they were not listening to you. Now I'm gonna call up another officer to help me arrest you too. Don't try and run. My house has cameras that go down the driveway, so I have proof of what you tried to do here. We are all going down to the station and have a little chat." One of the morning shift officers came out with handcuffs and had the 2 officers sit in his cruiser while he took my statement. I told him about the cameras and the situation that led up to the threats. I joined him in the cruiser and we all went down to the station. A few of the officers made jokes that I just couldn't stay away from my desk, but they sobered up when I told them that I was there to provide a longer statement along with what I wanted to charge the 2 officers with. It was a long morning, but by the time the officer drove me back home, I'd already started the process of filing charges against these HOA officers. When I got out of the cruiser, I saw another member of the HOA police collecting the golf cart. Officer number 3, "Do you know what happened to the 2 officers who own this cart?" Me, "They are down at the police station." Officer number 3, "Were they arrested?" Yeah, they trespassed on my property and threatened me with violence because I was taking out my garbage bins. Officer number 3, "Oh, then, well, I will let you off with a warning about the bin in your driveway. I'll, report this to my superior officer." Me, now way too tired for this nonsense. "You do that." I slept like that until around 5 p.m. When I went into my kitchen to get something to eat, I looked outside to see that I'd forgotten to put my bin back into the garage. There were dozens of pieces of paper attached to it and I took each of them to look them over. Each one of them was a ticket from another member of the HOA police force with fines that racked up to about $1,500 combined. I wanted to rip up every single ticket, but I didn't, knowing that this was just more evidence I could use against the HOA. I spent the rest of the night building my case. I had the camera footage, the tickets, and the toy gun was at the police station as evidence against the officers for trespassing and threatening me. When I was thinking about how the officers acted around me, it got me wondering if anyone else from the neighborhood had been threatened like I had and were too scared to come forward. I decided that the next time the HOA held a forum, I would use it to ask about that. The next forum was called 2 days after the arrests. The HOA claimed that the officers were just doing their duty and were unfairly treated and held without evidence. I decided to chime in before the HOA tried to spin the narrative. I bluntly told the HOA board and the neighbors that were gathered in the meeting that I'd been the person to arrest the officers because I was being threatened with violence for taking out my bins for garbage day. I explained what had happened, the evidence I had, and how I already got the process of charging them with a crime started. I made sure the HOA board got a piece of my mind, and I told them that the entire situation made me think that the officers had done something similar in the past, but threatened someone so horribly that they didn't want to come forward to say anything because they were actually afraid. I told the neighbors that I wanted to know if there was anyone else who had been in a similar situation so that we could charge not just the officers but the HOA board for their involvement in allowing people to act as an extension of their office to threaten someone's life. The HOA board told me that whatever I planned to do, it would not hold up in court because I was aware of the stipulations that came with being in an HOA. I told them that there had been no documentation of this police force they set up anywhere in their handbook or website, so that was withholding information and could be considered illegal. I left the meeting shortly thereafter, but not before inviting my neighbors to come to my home and bring whatever evidence they had so that we could build a case together against the HOA. I remember sitting in my living room just waiting for the meeting to finish and wondering if anyone else was gonna come. My doorbell rang, and when I opened it up, there were 10 people outside my door, one of them being a member of the HOA board. Board member, OP? Yeah. Board member, we are here to tell you our stories, and I'm here to help you fight whatever the board tries to throw at you. I started with each of the neighbors. Some of them had folders they brought with fines and letters they received from the HOA police about things they had done wrong, and those folders were thick. One neighbor told me that he had also been threatened with violence when he was shoveling his walkway after a snowstorm and, according to the fine, threw snow into an HOA board member's yard. The complaints and fines were all petty, and those that were threatened by the HOA police either were threatened with violence or had a toy gun pulled on them to threaten them into silence about their fines. The HOA board member gave her own story. So she was one of the new members of the board, having moved to assist this neighborhood's HOA when they lost a member. The company that she was a part of owned several HOAs throughout the state. She had seen what the HOA had been doing with the petty fines, and when she tried to bring it up, the rest of the board threatened her that they would have her fired and ousted from the neighborhood. She is a single mother with 2 young children and didn't want to risk her children's well-being, so she stayed silent but kept tabs on everything. She told me that targeting the HOA would bring the company that owned the HOA into the picture and help bring to light what she couldn't share without fearing retaliation. I gave everything to my lawyer and let him work his magic. It took a few months, but the members of the neighborhood and I were able to have our day in court. We presented all of the evidence we had compiled, showing just how long the HOA board and the HOA police had been treating the community like crap. The threats of violence and death were laid out in the open, and it was satisfying to see the different officers just crumple under the pressure of being questioned as to why they did what they did. The best part was that the company that owned the HOA wanted to testify for our side. The representatives from the board spoke at the trial, wanting to make sure that the behavior that the HOA board had, including the creation of the HOA police force, was not something the company condoned. The times that members of the company came to check on the HOA's progress and offer assistance, there was no mention of the sheer amount of fines, and since the handbook and website were updated regularly with clarifications on rules and requirements, there wasn't cause for them to think there was anything going on. The representative apologized to us, letting us know that regardless of the verdict, actions would be taken. The court found the HOA guilty of extortion, threatening a police officer, infringing against the imitation firearms laws of the state, and harassment. The officers that were arrested were sentenced to 5 years in prison. The HOA board had to pay an enormous fine to each and every person they acted out against in the neighborhood, and the company fired most of the HOA board and brought in new members from more reputable HOAs. The neighborhood has never been better. However, the HOA is still here, but it's not shelling out fines like candy. It's a lot more fair, and neighbors can dispute their fines or violations if they feel there was anything unfair happening. The HOA police was abolished as soon as the verdict came out, so there aren't people patrolling the neighborhood just looking for issues to fine people for. Oh, and all of the exuberant fines that the old HOA gave out to the neighbors, those were dismissed and everyone has a clean slate. And yeah guys, if you enjoy the HOA stories, please don't forget to like the video because that helps me tremendously. Thank you so much. The next one is a super satisfying story, and it is titled "Owner Fired My Dad and Then Came Asking for Work, but Got Denied." Back in 1997, my stepdad was the operations manager at a company that did telecommunications work. He hired me to work at the company for the summer, but I ended up enjoying the work and made a career out of it. About 4 months into my employment at the company, the owner and my stepdad has a disagreement over something very trivial, and the owner fired my dad. Since he's my stepdad, we have different last names, and I didn't feel like I would get caught up in this issue. I had my own issues with this company as well, mostly not being paid correctly and being denied benefits promised. Ended up working for another 18 months for the company before I left to work for a major telecommunications provider that we had done some work for. At the new company, I eventually took a position where I was responsible for hiring contractors, much like the company my dad and I worked for, to do construction. One day I got a call out of the blue from the owner of the contractor company. He wanted to see if he could get on my list of approved contractors and was hoping that we could discuss it over lunch. Typically, a project of this type would be a 75k to 200k project, and I would do 20 to 30 projects per year, so it could be a lucrative source of revenue for them. I agreed to a lunch date with the new owner at a fancy restaurant I always wanted to try. His pitch consisted of telling me what his company was capable of, how he valued his employees, and took good care of them. He mentioned the list of other companies he's done work for and the quality of the work. I mentioned that I used to work for his company, and he clearly did not remember my name. I also asked if he remembered the guy who hired me, and he said he did. When I mentioned he was my stepdad, the look of panic in his eyes set in. He clearly remembered my stepdad. I closed out the lunch meeting with a thank you for the food and an apology that my contractor list was full of more capable contractors, but would keep it in mind if something were to change. I never heard back from him again. Hey guys, welcome back to HOA Karen's Stories. I thought the HOA was annoying until a guy dressed in a fake HOA police uniform pulled a gun on me in my own driveway over a trash bin. But what he didn't know, I am an actual cop and I was not about to let this slide. What happened next turned the entire neighborhood upside down.